All right, we're here. Let's get things started. I'm Blake from Govly. Thank you so much for being here. Thanks for listening after, if you're catching the recording. I'll do some real quick housekeeping and we'll jump into today's discussion. Excited to have you here. If you are joining live, we'll be emailing you a copy of the recording afterwards. So if you can't attend the whole thing, you'll get the recording in your inbox right after this event. If you want to say hi, let us know you're here, feel free to do so in the chat box on the right side of your screen. And if you have questions or comments after the event, you want to reach me or someone here directly, I am just blake@govly.com. I'll put that in the chat so you have it. And yeah, really quickly on today's format, I'll do some quick intros with our panel. We'll jump into the conversation, which is going to start with SEWP VI and get into a few other exciting kind of current topics around the federal sales world. We're going to leave plenty of time at the end for questions. So if you do have questions that you want us to touch on today, please feel free to put them in the chat box on your screen at any time, and we'll get to as many as possible. Don't feel like you have to wait until the end to include your questions. Drop them in any time. That kind of helps me know how much time to leave for questions. If I see a lot in there, I'll be sure we leave some extra time for questions. So yeah, without further ado, let's do some really quick introductions on our panel here. Mike, I'll let you take it away. You're on mute, Mike.
Without fail, every time.
Right out the gate.
Thank you, everyone, for joining. Mike Weiland, CEO of Govly. I'm one of the co-founders over here. I am very much looking forward to having this conversation with AJ and Sonny and just sharing kind of my thoughts and past experience with SEWP and kind of government fiscal year ends as a whole. Govly is a platform for the entire supply chain of government contractors in the market intel space.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. AJ, why don't you give us the quick hello?
Sure. Thanks, Blake. Hi, I'm AJ Ezersky. I am the Senior Director of Capture and Contracts Management at Optiv Federal and its affiliates, FedBiz IT Solutions, ClearShark LLC, and ClearShark Services. We're doing business as Optiv+Clearshark. I've been in the industry for 20 plus years now. Not trying to age myself. I have been, I've worked for a top 4 consulting firm. I have been a system integrator. I have been a distie. I have been a value-added reseller. So no stranger to SEWP, no stranger to federal GWACs. Thanks, guys, for having me here, and I'm excited to talk more and share thoughts about SEWP VI and what's going on.
Thanks so much, AJ. Excited to have you here. And then last but not least, Sonny, if you want to say hello.
Sure thing, Blake. Great to see everyone. My name is Sonny Hashmi. I'm the senior advisor to Govly and also the head of public sector at Uncork. But until about 8 months ago now, I served as a commissioner for the Federal Acquisition Service at GSA, an organization that obviously is deeply, central to the acquisition space in the federal government. Managed and developed strategy for a lot of the GWACs that GSA manages. Obviously, worked very closely with the NASA team in that role. And prior to that, I've served several different roles within the federal government, including CIO at GSA, as well as in the private sector, where I've worked with mostly product companies to help them figure out go-to-market with the public sector space.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. So excited to have everyone on the panel here to talk about this. And speaking of, let's get into the kind of headline topic today, which of course is SEWP. I want to set the stage with SEWP a little to start and maybe talk a bit about how far the program's come and what's so unique about, SEWP VI as we step into this new generation of the program. I actually wanted to start with this. There's a quote at the very top of the official RFP for SEWP VI that I thought was pretty telling around the ambitions of the program. The exact language here is, the principal purpose of this requirement is to provide the federal government with an all-encompassing one-stop acquisition vehicle for information technology, products, and service solutions. Mike, maybe start with you. I mean, we've talked a lot about this. Like, what do you think, kind of language like this and everything else you've seen around SEWP VI, like, what is it telling you around the ambition and of the new generation of this program?
Yeah, I think so I've got experience with SEWP IV, SEWP V and actually not as much with SEWP VI anymore, but the evolution of SEWP is, been kind of that mentality since the start of wanting to be the, premier place for getting goods and services in the IT space to the federal government. How the government used to procure IT, go back to the 90s, was unbelievably cumbersome and difficult and time consuming. And these contract vehicles came into play. And GSA has been doing a great job, but GSA has gotten so big that it is still cumbersome and difficult, and maintaining schedules takes so much time, money, and energy. And so, from my experience at SEWP IV, when there was, forgive the numbers, but 30-something contractors to then SEWP V, which ballooned to 120, SEWP realized, hey, there is a lot of attention in the space of, there's a lot of people that are willing, capable, and able to bring goods and services at a fast pace for the best price. And that's what we need to extract. And so I think the evolution of where we're headed is just a continuation of that. I think Joanne has done a marvelous job of doing that. And I think this SEWP VI is just going to carry that on.
Yeah, great summary. Maybe something that's an easy segue to you with experience in the GSA and also seeing so much that's been going on with SEWP. Like, what have been your sort of like headline thoughts on the sort of scope and development of this program that we've been watching this year?
Yeah, I guess I think I will echo what Mike just shared. Right, SEWP is always known for whether it's the purchaser experience, whether it's making sure that there's agility in the marketplace. SEWP has always been that vehicle that is easy to transact against and easy to transact through, and that's what always has been the differentiator. Mike is right that GSA, by virtue of its mission, especially the Federal Acquisition Service, which mission is so broad, that by virtue of having that broad mission, the ability to transact through GSA is not always the easiest thing to do, because they have to accommodate for all these different permutations and combinations of products and services and different categories. As an example, Mike mentioned about 130 vendors that have been in SEWP. GSA manages relationships with over 24,000 vendors, right? 75 million products on schedule. So when you're building a solution that applies to all of those things all at the same time and incorporating all of the latest and highest bar requirements from OMB, from DoD, it by nature becomes almost too cumbersome. So GSA has done a lot of things over the last few years to kind of start to streamline some of those things. For example, the Fast Lane program that allows for quick updates to schedules. There's a lot of work going on behind the scenes to modernize the schedules experience. But without getting into it, SEWP was always, the faster to transact, easier to engage with program, but primarily because it was focused. It was focused on specific categories, products, and a limited number of providers that you transact through, and therefore you can manage that relationship very tightly. You can continue to kind of keep the pace going. So I guess my general kind of take when I see SEWP VI is, are they trying to do too much? All of a sudden, it becomes such a broad, especially when you add services. Services is a completely different animal. There's completely different challenges that come along with it. In order to do fixed price with P&M, labor rates, how do we do fair price reasonableness? How do you do packaging? And then, of course, the JV angle, the set-aside categories, it becomes a much more comprehensive and potentially cumbersome thing to take on. And my question is taking on that complexity going to move SEWP away from that core ethos of being very focused and easy to transact and easy to engage with? And that's something that I'd be curious and we'll be looking forward to.
Yeah, that's a great summary and kind of point there on that complexity that I do want to kind of circle back to, but maybe want to queue up you, AJ, with your high-level perspective on SEWP VI and everything you've seen with the program over the years, and having been, I imagine, neck deep in, figuring out SEWP VI for your firm this year. What are the big changes you've noticed? What stood out to you about this generation of the program?
Yeah. So I would completely agree with Mike and Sonny. I mean, the SEWP program office, whether it was SEWP V, SEWP IV, they have really been the golden standard, the premier contracting office. I think SEWP VI is bringing the best practices, and it's building upon the successes of SEWP V in the previous iterations. But again, those SEWP V in the previous iterations were very focused. And so now adding the complexities of the professional services with category B and category C, it does change that. Category A for SEWP VI, as we see it, currently today in the RFP, it is very much like what SEWP V is today. So I tell people that all the time, when you're looking at category A, and if that's the category that you're solely going after, it is very much what SEWP V looks like today. You're able to sell products. You're also able to sell professional services that support those products as far as implementation, integration, those types of things. Where, the complexities come in, I think, is those category B and category C. Category B, the enterprise-wide professional services, that category, while it does have a large and a small subcategories, if you look at the dollar threshold from the past performance that is required and the certifications that are needed, that category is really leaning towards the large companies, the large SIs, the ones that we know out in the market. It's making it a little difficult, for those small businesses to qualify and be within that, in that enterprise wide. I mean, I don't know how too many small businesses that are doing large enterprise-wide implementations, for VA or, DOD or Department of Navy. Those are typically our big guns, right? And then, category C, the mission, project-based mission professional services, that's small business set aside only. Those are opportunities for our small business to get involved. But I think, I'll kind of circle back here. I'm kind of, SEWP V, 87% of the bids went small business. And so, we've added this additional complexity with the professional services, and then, in addition, add the ability one. It's just, there's a lot going on right now. I think, SEWP VI category A still has, the meat and the true meaning of SEWP V. Where it's, simplifying the procurement, the innovation, getting emerging tech, low contract fees, all of that. But, it's been a lot from us, trying to figure it out, trying to respond and things like that. And I will say, if someone who's been in the industry for 20 years and has worked on SEWP IV and SEWP V, SEWP VI, there's still a lot of unknowns out there. So I would say, if anybody who's out there who's kind of like scratching their head, trying to figure it out, we are all in the same boat, and we're still waiting for some answers and some clarity from SEWP. And I think we're going to get that. That's their reputation. They're very, they are the gold standard, and we'll get that. I just think we just need to be a little bit patient.
Mike, I saw you nodding your head there.
Oh yeah, I mean it's entirely true. I think they are the gold standard. They are going to remedy this. I know we're going to get to the, the seemingly comedic strategic pause of sorts. But it's, putting a little bit of a forecast out there. I think they are. I don't think they're biting too much or taking too big of a bite of the apple. But I do believe that they're pushing the limits a bit with the groups. I think there was 1,300 interested vendors. The intel that we have, I'll put the stake in the ground that I expect to see between 450 and 500 awardees. Is kind of the rough placeholder, and that's no matter how you cut it. There's 130, maybe 144 after novations and however those go, but to go from that to 500 with different groups and professional services, like, that's a big lift. And so I agree with you, AJ, that they are, their core product, low contract fees, get something on contract this morning, get it sold and awarded this afternoon. That's not going away. The complication is going to be with some of these other groups, and like you said, the Ability One and National Institute of the Blind and all of these other things that they're trying to add on, which is totally value add. It's just, nobody really knows how to do it yet, and it's causing more questions than we have answers. And There you go, Blake. A segue into the next one.
Yeah, let's talk about it. I mean, you mentioned the strategic pause, Mike. Big questions. What's going on? What happens next? Is the rest of the timeline gonna, line up the way we thought it would? Or I know you've got thoughts on this, Mike, to kick us off.
Yeah, I mean, AJ and Sonny, you guys and I have not talked about this, but from my crystal ball, like the strategic pause, it has to go out past September before they even consider putting a new thing out. And I would even argue that it gets re-released in its entirety. But that's kind of where I sit, just because of the quantity of questions and the need to maybe do a bit of a reset based on the volume of challenges that they're going to face, is kind of where I sit.
Yeah, Mike, I would second that. I think that's a reasonable expectation. I mean, I think we know that they received over 1,000 questions at this point, and I think, frankly, there's probably more in the works, especially because it's the first time SEWP is delving into services, professional services, enterprise services. There is a whole different level of that's a whole different submarket, right? And so I'm not surprised that 1,000 questions were sent, because if I'm honest, as I looked at the draft RFP and then RFP, there's a lot of things that are kind of written to be vague and kind of high level, and especially when it comes to services, and especially when it comes to a vehicle that has a fixed number of awarded slots, they have to be as specific as possible, because the evaluation criteria, the path performance, all of the things that are going to be part of the determination on who makes it into that top echelon and therefore an awardee and who doesn't, needs to be as specific as possible. Otherwise, SEWP is going to unfortunately face the same challenges that NITAC has faced, and then even some GSA programs have faced, with a never-ending series of protests, whether it's around the JV criteria, whether it's around small business categorization, whether it's compared to price performance, and that's not good for everybody. Right, so that may require a significant update and change to the RFP itself, to add that criteria and to add specificity, or at least through the Q&A process. And it's a very heavy lift. Having been on that side of the aisle, I know how many people have to work how many days to perfectly go through each of the Q&As, document them, make sure that they're legally sufficient, make sure that they are not adding any kind of overdue burden. There's burden reduction focus. To do it well, it requires a significant amount of effort. So we're definitely seeing at least a delay at the very least. The other thing that I'm also hearing, and this may be just conjecture, and by the way, just to be clear, it's not based on information that I got directly from NASA, nor through GSA, but just in the zeitgeist, there's ongoing questions around GWAC duplication. That's been something that's been going on across the government for a long time. There's been a lot more kind of direct involvement from OFPP around authorizing government-wide vehicles. Part of that was done through category management and who gets a big certification and who doesn't, and there's some criteria for it. Obviously, SEWP is going to be a big vehicle, assuming that is work underway already. But having said that, there's been questions going back as far as at least a year ago around what the added value of having another enterprise-wide services vehicle would be when we have the likes of, Align 3 coming down, and of course it is Stars 3 for small businesses, and there's all these vehicles already. Then on the Army side, there's certain vehicles. You have obviously HHS. So is the new vehicle going to add significant differentiation, either in terms of reaching out to a brand new segment of the market, or having a different enough install base or marketplace that justifies saying, hey, this is a different marketplace than the GSA vehicle offers, so now agencies have options. If it's going to offer a pass to the same vendors with the same services, then the question becomes, what is the additional burden good for? Because let's be honest, each one of these GWACs adds significant burden to industry as well as to government. To maintain these contracts, to bid on these contracts, to make sure that they're competitive, requires significant work. So there is some question around. So I think that maybe at this point in the rearview mirror, but that question continues to come up: is why do we need another GWAC for services when we have so many already? And what is the differentiated value it's going to add to the same companies and the same agencies that good or bad, have multiple options at this point already.
Great point, Sonny. Great point. I would say, Mike, the only thing I would push back a little bit on is, and this is proposal capture manager, right? I am really hoping they don't throw it away and restart over. I think.
I hope so too.
Yeah, I really, really hope that is not the case for all of us, proposal and capture managers that have literally given up our summer, which we know that's our job, but we have literally given up every holiday, I think, this summer. And I keep joking internally with my team, it would be our luck that, Labor Day is right around the corner and we'll, that's a few weeks and we'll get the new amendment. I really hope that's not true though. But, I really think, the solicitations need to be sharpened. They need to, be a little less subjective, specifically around the evaluation criteria. Give us more specifics. I think there needs to be a look at ensuring that there is, not contradiction. I think with some of the amendments that were released, it begged for more questions, or there was more contradictions that, it opened up. And so I really hope that, the SEWP program office takes a look at that and really sharpens their pens and makes it as clear cut and dry for all of us. I read an interesting article, over the couple of weeks that said, one consulting firm reviewed 7 different proposals and they all 7 looked entirely different. And for a large, solicitation and GWAC of this size, that's problematic, right? It should be very clear. And so I really hope they don't completely take it down. I would hope that, they're taking a look at this, and simplifying the RFP. I think that, with all the categories in one solicitation document, it's sometimes very hard to know when one category ends and the other category begins, and what requirements go with what exhibits go with what. And, they've done a great job of trying to provide that clarification, but still trying to follow all of the changes and the amendments. It does cause complexities and confusion. But I think, just being able to answer some of those questions, providing clear evaluation criteria, responding to the questions. I think 3% of the questions were answered. I read, I think they had only 200 duplicate questions out of the 6,700. But over 2,000 of those questions, they came back and said were not questions, they were actually suggestions. And so I hope that those, while I know we're not in a draft RFP and, the contracting office is not typically looking for suggestions at that point in time, that's kind of passed. Because there were so many suggestions, I hope they do take a serious look at those suggestions and look to see, what industry is saying, how they are impacted, or are you getting the best pool of, potential awardees for your solicitation to really support the vision of your SEWP VI contract that you're going after.
AJ, I am right there with you across the board. I really hope they don't. I think what's pulling at me lately is the quantity of questions and the avenues for conflicting answers and slightly different verbiage on the question and a slightly different answer. It's just rife for what you talked about, Sonny. Like it's gonna be protest hell. And I say that knowing most recently, as of last week, was notified of a company that got kicked out of ITES 4H because of question number, I think it was 67. They didn't answer in their response document as clear as it could have been, and there was a Q&A that said you need to answer with more than one sentence, and they answered with one sentence. And so, like that's one question out of 1,000 or 2,000 that now you, AJ, you and your team are unbelievably burdened. And I think a quick side recommendation is, the Q&A, from my perspective, is just as important as the solicitation document. Like everyone that's responding to SEWP VI, like the importance of those Q&As, it cannot be understated.
Sonny, I see you nodding your head.
I think that's exactly right. I think we all know stories like that, and that's why, especially when you couple that with a contract vehicle that's going to have a fixed number of slots, it just opens up so much opportunity and potential for either GAO reviews or COFC reviews, and like whether it's technicalities or legalese or or there's also past precedent. There's a lot of case law that is now past precedent for all new vehicles coming in, especially things like JV relationships and how do they compare to small business goaling challenges, like do the government-wide socioeconomic goals flow down to GVACs or not? There's a lot of case law on that, and there's a lot of disagreements between parties on those types of things. Should that be an agency responsibility or a vehicle responsibility? So it ain't easy, right? And then when you just add scope, all these dimensions, just add to the complexity, and that's my concern. So I totally agree. SEWP needs to find a way forward. I would hate to see this be just a continuous kind of cycle of publish and Q&A and protests. However, it's vitally important for exactly what Mike said. The Q&A are going to be the answers when they come out are officially part of the RFP package, and therefore they apply when decisions are being made. Those answers are being evaluated or part of the rubric internally, and therefore industry needs to be very carefully going through each one of those Q&As, the questions and answers, so that they can fine-tune the proposal. One thing that concerns me is exactly the example you shared, AJ, which is if a contract vehicle is if the requirements are written so broadly, then multiple proposals that are being internally even reviewed look 7 different ways. There's a problem, because that indicates immediately that there's not going to be in one easy, consistent, and defensible way to evaluate this proposal on the other side, and that again leads a lot of openness to subjectivity and therefore protests and other concerns. And so that to me requires kind of reclarification on exactly the answers and the responses that are needed and how they're going to be evaluated. I think one of the things that GSA started to do really well while I was there towards my end of the tenure, and if you look at how the Oasis Plus process has worked, especially in the last 6 or 8 months, is that allowing organizations to see their point total upfront before submission is a hugely beneficial way. So that's something that we prioritized, because the idea again wasn't that you shouldn't be sending your proposal into the ether and then hoping that the way you calculate your points are the way that the government is going to look at. To the extent that you can provide tooling so that as you build your response, it starts to kind of calculate the points total, and then you can make decisions around, do I partner or not? Do I add my partner's qual here? Do I replace this one with that one? That gives a lot of clarity and ideally a lot of kind of confidence to the proposers. And so I would recommend that as SEWP think about modernizing that experience, that they think of those toolings like that, especially when it comes to services, because that is the most subjective of all categories. You can compare 2 laptops and pricing, and you can compare their specs, but it's hard to compare 2 different services proposals, based on past performance, because it's all written to be fairly subjective, and therefore has a lot of room for understanding and so forth.
Sonny, I could not agree more. Sorry, Blake. I don't know if you read my notes. We didn't share notes. We didn't talk about this, but that is absolutely one of the recommendations that I would love to see is an evaluation scorecard that can be provided to industry so that you can determine your bid strategy. Are you bidding? Are you not bidding? What quals you need to use? Are you partnering? I would love to see that come out with SEWP VI, and then it provides a little bit more granularity too as far as the evaluation criteria, and where you're sitting when you're submitting that proposal.
Yeah, no, this has been a fantastic conversation on SEWP. I want to I hate to do it because we have so much great content on SEWP that I'm sure we could continue on all day. I want to carve out some time for a few other topics across the kind of federal procurement landscape here, because there are other things going on as much as SEWP is taking up so much collective oxygen in the industry right now. But we've got a few things also kind of happening this fall and winter. I mean, we're in the throes of busy season for our industry. We've got an election coming up and have an administration change one way or the other. I'll leave it as an open question for anyone who wants to run with it first. Anything notable this time of year that is standing out to you?
I'll go. I mean, mostly by nature of Govly being an analytics platform and seeing the numbers and the RFQs, across not just SEWP, but most of the GSAs, the ITES, the two gets the like. The busy season started maybe a week or two earlier this year than it did last year, which was kind of cool to see. I think on SEWP alone, as of the past 30 days, we're already at just shy of like 4,400 net new opportunities, which is almost, what is that, about 7% higher than last year for the same period of time. And so it's, one of the questions that I get asked every year by friends, family, colleagues, other is, election year, like for your space, for the IT, like, does it matter who wins? And, as much as like it's a more entertaining answer if the answer is yes, the data shows otherwise. And so in the IT space, at the levels that, we're doing for the goods and services, the government and the VA, for example, changes over the computers on a regular basis. It doesn't matter if there's a Democrat or Republican in office. And so it's, I think one of the telling things that I am seeing over the course of charting this data is just a general increase in IT spending, a general increase in SaaS spending. The budget or the pie is just getting bigger. And I think that is probably the most consistent and important message, for this year.
You mean no one's running on the No More Cybersecurity platform?
Yeah.
Okay.
We're not wiping down servers or
going back to pen and paper. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think. Sorry. Before I go, AJ, do you want to go next?
Go ahead.
I guess from my perspective, there's a couple things. There's a couple caveats maybe to that. I think it generally like that's not surprising, right? I think more and more of the percentage, and I hope that that's true, right? Because I think it's important, and it's a right strategy for any government, regardless of political affiliation, to invest more, of their dollars into capabilities that create the most leverage, which is technology, right? Instead of hiring hundreds of people, how about we build more capabilities and technology that can then serve thousands of millions of people, and therefore, investing in technology, smart investments in technology, I should say, can have the most leverage compared to an alternative of hiring teams and teams of people to do the same job, right? So hopefully that's true. Hopefully it's also true that we're seeing and continue to increase investments in cloud and SaaS. I hope that is coupled with the decreased investment in legacy technologies and data centers and such. The one thing I will say is that there has been an exceptionally, the last 3 to 4 years at least, have been also exceptionally kind of targeted in terms of IT investments because of all the presidential priorities that actually, I think, really for the first time, really focus on technology as a core lever, right? So if you look at the president's management agenda, one of the core pillars is UI improvements. You look at the executive order on cybersecurity, you see the executive order on AI. All those compel action, and those actions typically downstream lead to IT purchasing services as well as products, right? So, and at the same time, we've seen about $2 billion flow through the TMF, the brand new money, right? And so the last 3 or 4 years have been years of plenty when it comes to technology investments. More money on the table, ARP investments had a technology element, IRA investments had technology elements. And so more money and more kind of top-down direction to improve cybersecurity, to modernize systems, to improve UI. So while I don't think that trend is going to reverse, however, as we go forward into the next 4 years, a few questions come to my mind. First of all, is funding. Depending on where the election goes, especially not just the presidential election, but in the House and the Senate, depending on the CR situation, we may not have funding to invest in new initiatives. And so when you see big initiatives, multi-million-dollar initiatives going on, some of them may be on pause for some time until the budgetary picture becomes clear. And that becomes more or less complicated depending on how the elections go, both in the House, Senate, and then, of course, at the presidential level. And so there may be delay or a pausing of new initiatives until some of that thing is worked out. One of the things that we're hearing in my world is that there has been an accelerated end of year activity this year because a lot of agencies are trying to lock down as many dollars on contracts now with the fear that they're not going to have a budget next year, and therefore they won't be able to invest in new technologies or new initiatives that are important. Yet because of the CR limitations, they may not be able to kind of do anything about it. And lastly, I think all indications are going towards the fact that I think TMF is not going to be funded, at least not at the levels that it was a couple of years ago, and therefore if that starts to kind of constrict the supply of kind of no-year money, that also may lead to agencies having to make difficult choices around technology investments. And so while I completely agree that technology investments in the long picture are going to continue to go up, which is the right thing to do for the country, which makes perfect sense to me, how it's going to matter in the short run in the next year or two is maybe a little bit up for debate, and like we'll see how it goes depending on some of the elections that might happen.
AJ, I know SEWP has put your entire summer in a headlock, but have any of these topics bubbled up and got on your radar and challenged your conventional thinking lately?
Yeah, we've definitely been focused on SEWP VI. We've been focused on Alliant 3. I think it's the season of GWACs, right? But, we are in the midst of busy season. We've seen it hit earlier, like Mike said. Just talking to a lot of our government contracting officers out there in their contracting shops, their deadlines to get the, end of year requirements was a lot earlier this year. And they've already kind of closed their doors. And so if your, requirement is not in with the contracting officer, it's going to be difficult to get that, that through, get that awarded. So, it's going to take creative solutions. It's going to take, seeing where you can, shift money or shift, the request to another contracting office and really leveraging relationships and things like that, I think, within industry and within government to government. So we absolutely are seeing, busy season start early. We're also, I think, in Sony, being back in, my professional services, hat and world, many years ago, we typically called the year after, or the few months after a presidential election, again, didn't matter if it was the, who won. We called it lame duck season. It was that. There wasn't a lot of new initiatives that were happening. There were, seeing where the money was happening. There was, always a CR. Are we going to get a full budget, approved for the year? And so, it was really from a professional services standpoint, it was holding on to the work that you had, making sure that you were making the statements and the cases for the successes and why it needs to continue to be funded. But that new work was kind of out of reach for a while. So, that's kind of my thoughts.
That's
Sorry.
No, super, super helpful. Appreciate that. I want to throw out, Sonny mentioned the topic, maybe a little bit of a curveball question. So let me know if if it doesn't go anywhere. We haven't talked about it, but how does the federal government get to wrap its head around buying AI? I worked for an AI startup. Trying to figure out how to sell AI was the most bizarre kind of sales and marketing job I ever had. I can't imagine how even knowing the cloud is still getting figured out. How the hell does the federal government wrap its head around buying AI as this emerging technology comes out? It's obviously a hot technology and we use it here at Govly, blah, blah, blah. But does anyone have thoughts on where that goes? It seems like a thing to figure out.
I mean,
Sonny, you want to go?
I was part of the federal government, was the CIO and part of the CIO council when cloud became a thing, right? So I was part of the initial team that set up FedRAMP and the initial kind of forays into cloud. The world looked very different back then. And so the last 14 years, cloud started out as, this is just a replacement of my data center. I can just move my racks into somebody else's data center, right? It's basically just virtual servers I'm buying to a completely different marketplace, a completely different set of capabilities, a completely different, and of course, coupled with a completely different way to purchase and monitor, manage, and secure it. And so whatever we think AI is going to look like 14 years from now is going to look very, very different, right? And so it's first of all, predicting or creating anything that is going to survive the next 10, 15 years is going to be impossible. It took a good number of years for agencies to figure out how to even buy cloud, right? And then frankly, there are parts of it which are still not figured out, like dynamic pricing for consumption-based activities. Is not a solved problem in the federal government because you have to do accruals and forecasting and budgeting and locking down of contract ceilings and everything. You have to essentially buy cloud in the most inefficient way, which is predicting the worst case scenario and buying for that. And then towards the end of the year saying, I guess we're not going to burn through all of our AWS spend. So we're going to either obligate it, or we're going to pass through products through it, or like these are all wrong ways to buy cloud, right? But I can understand, like, I mean, that head efficiency requires the government agencies do certain things in a way that doesn't make sense in the private life. But having said that, AI is going to be even more complicated because partially AI spend is going to be cloud spend, but even more hard to predict, right? And then, and secondly, the non-cloud parts of AI spend, which is software or data or training, that's using kind of baselines and metrics and measurement mechanisms that are not familiar to the government at all. You're not buying. The government is perfectly designed to buy one of two types of things perfectly. Either you're buying chairs and pencils, a particular part number, a defined product spec, and a competitive marketplace that you can compare prices against, or you're buying aircraft carriers, which is a once in a while, bespoke, based on requirements thing that will take 10 or 15 years to build with a high level of visibility and oversight, cost basis contracts. One of those two things government knows how to buy really well. You can buy space shuttles or you can buy pencils and chairs. All of this stuff in the middle, which is not quite a standard thing, requires a lot of thinking, may change based on requirements, but it's not bespoke built for government. It becomes very, very hard to buy. And we've seen that with cloud, we've seen that with software generally. Buying software programs, like 60-70% of the programs in government software programs fail because it failed as defined by the over budget, behind schedules, or did not meet expectations. Because you're not buying a product commodity and you're not quite building an aircraft carrier. So you're applying the knowledge from building aircraft carriers to writing software systems, and it just doesn't translate. And therefore, we start to add Agile into the mix, and Agile is not really predictable enough. So the government, like, you can't do PWS and also Agile. It's a problem that hasn't been solved. So long story short, we don't know what the best way to buy AI is going to be. I don't think anybody's figured it out. I think what's going to happen in the meantime is exactly what happened when the cloud was new, which is every company is going to rebrand their product as the AI product and try to upsell margins on it, right? So now it's the same chair, but AI powered, and therefore it's 20% more expensive. And so that to me is just an inevitable kind of byproduct of capitalism, but we have to be smarter than that. The government has to be smarter than that. And so a lot of the people I know who are doing amazing work on the government side is to really understand AI, define it, categorize it first. And then subsequently, I know there's a team at GSA, at least, and I'm sure in other agencies, but GSA, that is deeply working on the best ways to procure AI. There was a buying guide that was recently issued about a couple months ago by the information technology category within GSA that basically breaks it down really thoughtfully and starts to build some recommendations on agencies to think about when they purchase AI. It's not a solution yet, but it's more of a guidance. And so we'll see more and more of that coming out over the next year, I think.
Excellent summary. I do want to jump to audience questions, but on that topic of AI, AJ, Mike, anything to add?
Yeah, I think the only thing I'd add is, Sonny, you're right. Every company is already an AI company, and I think it's already happening. I think the government is already buying AI, and there's so many definitions of AI that the government doesn't just buy an AI. The government's going to buy a solution set that's going to be AI powered. And so the idea that the government's going to learn how to buy a singular AI is just, from my perspective, a figment of imagination at this point. And it's just going to be a feature in addition to what they were already needing. And it's hopefully going to step function them in terms of productivity. I think that's the goal. Because it's here.
And that's why I think those feature capabilities are going to be monetized differently, right? Like, I'll give an example. I use the word Box. Box is doing very aggressive things with AI, but the way they add the AI features into their product is monetized in a certain way. But that's
Sonny, I would agree with you, with the exception that I believe, like storage in the cloud, I believe there's not going to be a non-AI version of product in the very near term.
No, I agree with that. But I guess my caution to government agencies or even private sector companies is like, AI is like this very big catch-all word, right? You have to go 2 or 3 levels deeper around exactly what the product and capability is that you're buying and how it is best to monetize and calculate it. Because buying generic, like turning on Copilot in Office 365 is technically AI, and so is doing a targeting solution in the intelligence community using a highly specialized and proprietary and classified data set. Both are AI technically, but they're not the same. They are very different in terms of commoditization and forecastability and how much did they cost. And so you have to go much deeper than just saying we need to buy AI to really think about what you're getting, how are you going to monetize it, and what is the business value that you're going to get out of it, and how you're going to measure that. That to me is, it's like it's too big of a moniker to just cover the same way of doing things underneath it. You have to break it down at least 2 levels of taxonomy before you can start getting smart about what is one thing versus another.
And the other thing I would add is I don't think it's just going to be a challenge for how the government buys AI. I think it's also how it's going to be utilized, right? Like, just look at the proposals responses right now. How is industry going to utilize AI, and what are the standards and what's accepted, right? With the government deliverables on professional services utilizing AI. Government utilizing AI to review proposals. I speculation here, but is that something that SEWP VI is looking at, just based on the technicalities and the strict formatting and everything that they have been coming out and really hitting on that more than the content sometimes? Is that how they're planning on getting through that evaluation of those 600 plus proposals in time to meet that April 2025 deadline? So I think, not just is the challenge of buying AI, but also how is industry going to be utilizing AI to provide the government, property deliverables, our proposals that we submit, and then the evaluation. That all, we need to figure that out from a standards perspective.
I mean, by the way, like, there's a dark side that like in Marvel universes, that there's like always like these parallel universes. There's a dark side of that universe also, which is basically AI is writing the proposals that AI is reading, and really the human is completely out of the loop, which is actually already happening. Like, half the people I know who are writing narrative responses are using ChatGPT to build out a 90% response and then just go through. And then so what's the point? Like to me, narrative responses to proposals start becoming less and less relevant, because they're going to be written by some, kind of like lukewarm, based on prior things, machine learning or generative AI algorithm. And so what's the point of like filling 20 pages of something? And actually, a lot of the agencies, some of the agencies, I should say, that I'm talking to, are realizing that just asking for narrative responses is almost like the value is going down. And what we're going to hopefully maybe start seeing more and more of in these kind of, especially in the service and solutions area, is tech demos, is code reviews, is code submissions, and tech challenges, and things that actually require human thinking and, frankly, like execution. Like, I mean, I would much rather give an award, a software award, to a company that can show me their repo and show me the checks and checks out, and I can see the discipline that they have in their DevOps process, compared to somebody who's got 20 pages of perfectly written content, but it doesn't really show me whether they actually have the capacity, capability to deliver a good product. That's where a lot of agencies are going. The problem is in government, let's be honest, not all agencies have the internal evaluation teams that can effectively do proper tech challenges and properly evaluate those kind of things. And so that's a skill that needs to continue to be built, I think, in government agencies.
Outstanding commentary. I pulled that question out of my hat, and I'm glad we had some good discussion on it. It sounds like it's an interesting one, and I think I've got the topic for our next webinar, so that's great. We'll do a quick speed round on audience questions. I was able to condense a few to one good one right here, so we can knock this out real quick, and then we can wrap up for the day and let folks get back to their day. But Sydney here asks, straightforward question. I think it's a good one. Easier or harder to win business on SEWP VI than SEWP V, and maybe versus other programs too? AJ, I'll let you run with this.
I think it's going to be harder. I think, with the number of awardees that potentially, if you submit a qualified bid, you're going to get an award, there are going to be a lot more competition going after bids. So I think, the disbursement of business is truly going to be dispersed. Right now, there's 140 some SEWP V award winners. It's kind of, all kind of pushed out, who your competition is. We've been able to, hey, this is my niche, not so much in words, but you kind of figure out where your specialty is, where's the business you're going to go after. And if you're, doubling, tripling, quadrupling that size of that award, I think, it is going to be a little more difficult to get business.
We're tight on time. We're bumping on time, so I'll just let Mike and Sonny give the quick answer. Easier, harder, maybe one sentence on why.
I think it's
harder for all. Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, Mike, please. Sorry.
The harder for all the same things that AJ said. The opportunity that comes out that might be more of a jump ball is just going to have 10 responses as opposed to 3. And even if you have registration, it's going to be, there's going to be lots of companies that are willing to take it or even try to buy the business and eat into, negative margins. And so it's going to put more pressure on the registration holder.
Yeah, I think everybody covered it pretty well. I think the harder part is going to be post award. Even if you make it to the pool, the competition, just because it's a bigger pool, is going to be more driven to, especially in the services area, rate gaming and doing some of the things. And so one of the things, again, one of the beauties of SEWP has always been very clean, transparent, easy to transact. So I hope that whatever happens with SEWP VI does not dilute that. And that's my concern, is that especially when you start flowing services through it, the inherent complexities will lead to those kinds of things that people don't like in other vehicles, which is, hey, I got on the vehicle, didn't win any business, everybody's undercutting the rates, and now they're doing, unholy partnerships behind the scenes, and how do I even get on one of these partnerships? That's the kind of stuff that potentially could add more risk and therefore make it harder to transact once you even get a SEWP award.
Fantastic. Well, this was a great discussion across a bunch of exciting topics. Thanks so much to our panel, AJ, Sonny, Mike, for attending and making for a great conversation today. Thanks so much for everyone who attended, watched the recording. I'm Blake at Govly. Head to govly.com if you want to learn more about us or get in touch with us. Happy to point you in the right direction. And again, thanks to our panel. Thanks for attending today. Have a good one, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks,
Thank
Mike.
you.
Thanks, AJ.